a little bit of an uncomfortable subject, but I think it is really important to acknowledge as a facilitator, as a teacher, as someone that holds space, whether that's in a classroom, through the other side of the screen, if it's one-to-one, if it's working in groups. There's always a dynamic to consider in relation to who holds the power and who in the space is given an opportunity to explore and unpack what that means for them as a learner, as a recipient of information, and hopefully as a contributor, a co-creator, and a collaborator. I really believe that learning is a process that is about a conversation that is ongoing. It's something that is fluid, that moves in real time. And if you are someone that holds knowledge, or you have something to present or curriculum to teach, I like to think of it more as a conversation or an information sharing session. There might be resources and tools that you have. There might be a structure and a format to guide you. But all of that becomes irrelevant if you cannot meet the people that are in the room as people, as individuals, respond to their unique needs on the day, whether that's accessibility needs, adaptions regarding their learning style, holding a space, hopefully, that is trauma informed and creates safety so that learning can actually happen in a way that feels enjoyable and engaging. But this sense that we're using kind of like an old framework of deliver and disseminate is something that, if I connect with memories of recent learning experiences, or go back into the archives and think about things in the past that I've engaged with that I've found have left me, have left a positive imprint on me, have maybe even shaped the direction in my kind of professional development as a facilitator. It's always been a learning environment and an individual that has this really unique skill of being able to invite everyone into discussion. So they're there in a way to activate and stimulate and inspire, and hold space for discussion, for unpacking, maybe even debate, so that the space then becomes a kind of a melting pot of a process of how are you responding and engaging to this. And if it's not catching your attention, and if it's not nourishing you, then there is the possibility in real time of making micro adjustments to be able to then try to catch that person so that they can feel part of the process. And obviously there are so many factors that go into this that make it kind of a more complex discussion than just a kind of black and white scenario. But there have been times where I've had a lesson plan. I'm thinking back to very early experiences facilitating groups, and the lesson plan was more for me to keep me in a sense of, am I on track and am I covering everything that I want to cover in order to present a range of information so that it feels enriching and that there's no kind of missing puzzle pieces. But ultimately, when you're working with groups in particular, and groups that have unique individual needs, additional support or accessibility needs, and I know the very first group I ever took, that lesson plan ended up on the floor beside me and I didn't use it. So I was then stepping into the skills and leaning into the skills of improvisation, which has actually been such a good support for me in teaching and facilitation work. But I'm mentioning all that to say that there is something unique as well about voice as a subject, and I think the awareness that it is really important to have about perceptions around power and also reality around power as well, in terms of if you have specialist knowledge in whatever avenue of voice that is, and you are sharing work that is about hopefully inviting people to learn and discover and experiment and explore and kind of come into this world maybe that they have had limited opportunities to experience, or part of the reason as a learner why they are in this space is because they maybe are experiencing a challenge, a barrier. There might have been previous experiences which related to exploration of voice or musical education that actually didn't hold a safe space for them, and therefore they're additionally vulnerable, and they're placing trust in you as a facilitator to open up a space that feels inviting, and that vulnerability can create, even on this kind of a level that wouldn't necessarily be a conscious choice of an imbalance in power or a kind of hierarchical dynamic of someone coming into that learning space and actually saying, I don't know anything about voice, I don't know, it's not my subject, it's not my specialism. And that is such a vulnerable space to be in. And part of the reason that I love this work and that I love opening up this discussion around, how are you even identifying and referring to and thinking about your voice as a kind of starting point, is because my hope in a way is that somebody can come away from a session and feel like they have tools to build better relationship and understanding of themselves and be that guide and that reference point. And then long range view is for somebody to come away feeling like they are the expert on their own voice. And that's not to say that there isn't a place for like super niche support, to work on a particular challenge or to focus on an area of development. And particularly when you then go into the kind of vocal health or the kind of clinical realm where there might be additional support required, and that ultimately requires specialists. But in my experience of being on my own vocal health journey, I had such a joy of being able to work with practitioners that had such good bedside manner and such good person-centered skills of being able to meet you as you are as an individual and listen to your challenges, hold space for you, and yes, ultimately shed light on an area that maybe you don't have that knowledge on, but then invite you into that conversation and say, it's okay, let's explore this together. And also, I think when you're working in a clinical setting, so much of your work is about simplifying language and translating that so that it's client friendly. And yeah, so I've been very fortunate to have good experiences in that capacity. But I think when it comes to a discourse or particular modality, then we're entering into territory where someone has a curriculum, someone has a methodology, someone has a particular approach, and it might be very specialist, it might be very niche, and it's a whole other layer of being mindful, I think, in the role of a facilitator, to keep checking yourself and to keep asking, if I am presenting information and I'm sharing tools and resources, however well intentioned that is, if the kind of the goals or the outcomes are related to empowerment and increased confidence and supporting individuals to kind of realize their potential, that isn't enough, I think, is what I'm saying. There needs to be some additional reflection, and I'm going to say peer supervision as well as like a really helpful tool, but to keep us as practitioners on our toes. Also community as well, the peer support piece around sharing with other people that are in similar or parallel disciplines, because it is, even though we're kind of instinctively putting ourselves in the shoes of the learner, we can't fully do that, especially at the moment that we are holding space. So without feedback, without having that reflexive practice, without having opportunities for other people to really let us know when a space feels less like an invitation and more like a kind of, I'm going to say a dictation, but that there's a script that's stuck to, and that's it, and you're the knowledge holder and the gatekeeper and the one that's ultimately holding power. I think it's very, very easy to meander into this territory, and it can happen in such a subtle way that we do need to actually build things into our practice and into the way that we are actually reaching out to clients and students and including them in the conversation and the discussion around, how can the facilitation be improved? How can the resources be improved? How can the space holding be more supportive? And yeah, it that takes more resource, it takes more time, effort, energy, but I think it's so worth it. I attended a training the other day, and there were slides in a PowerPoint. There was a facilitator with lecturing experience who delivered the session. but there was at no point did I feel like it was so inclusive, it was so warm and friendly and accessible. There were reflection points, there were opportunities for discussion as a group, there were group exercises, all of these things that kind of they built in space for the learners to be participants, active participants, engaging, contributing, feeling like they're actually part of the conversation and actually that they're valued as well. And this all sounds so obvious in a way because I'm hearing myself saying this and I'm like, yeah, these are all like on paper obvious things, but in practice, I think, yeah, it's an additional effort to make sure that we don't stray into that territory. And obviously I'm speaking specifically to vocal work and voice work because of how vulnerable it can be, and because on the outset the problem solving exercise might be related to a creative activity, but then depending on the tools and framework that you're using, it transpires that actually what you're doing is supporting that person to explore and navigate nervous system work, and working on the body and exploring other avenues to kind of help facilitate in a roundabout way what that original entry point was. And I think that's why I really like the word guide, a support or a guide, because it definitely implies the quality of experience, but it's also speaking to the fact that this person is walking alongside and beside you, and that they're there to support and enable and facilitate and maybe signpost, and that the reference points that they provide, it is sort of insinuated that because they have traversed that territory before, that also gives them insight from the learner perspective as to where there might be spaces that are kind of more vulnerable, that do require a bit more support, and that actually those moments are the moments to be particularly careful around, to ensure that there's still this sense of autonomy, and that there's still this opportunity for collaboration and dialogue, even if someone is actually communicating, I'm in territory I've never been in before, and this is totally unfamiliar to me, and I don't really feel like I'm in my zone of genius or whatever. That actually, from a facilitation point of view, that is such a humbling thing to be given permission to witness that, and to hold that, and actually be with a person in that uncertainty. And maybe there are then tools that can be offered to support that exploration and provide anchor points, but that it's always a dialogue and a collaboration. And I'm also reflecting on that, just pulling in the thread of like space holding quality that I've experienced in a therapeutic container. And the best experiences have always been those where I'm being given space to communicate my needs and to, to articulate them, And there's something so important in being able to say, I'm unsure, or so that that can actually be heard and acknowledged, and recognized, witnessed, before there is this kind of like slamming the book down and being like, here's the solution, because it might not be the solution. It's a co-creation process. So yeah, those are thoughts for today. And I'd love to hear if you have any particular experiences from a learner point of view where you've, just felt like the environment created and the support created was really beneficial. Anything that stands out for you back from school days. Equally, any experiences that were challenging or that are kind of still stuck in your mind as being kind of lessons of a dictatorship rather than a play space. I'm sure we've all got a few recollections of that one teacher maybe that we didn't get along with so well. So I'd love to hear. Let me know. This is a subject that is very close to my heart, and yes, no facilitator is perfect, and it's all a work in progress. So hopefully we can come to every day and treat it like a school day. There's always something to learn and something to humble us.